Bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs.
Bows and TKOs, we are live. Episode 10 coming at you. Another mobile podcast from Montana. We can't skip all the MMA action that's going on. Because to be honest, when it comes to fight cards, it's a little light on the UFC side. But we got new fights, new MMA news. We're going to talk Ultimate Fighter. I have not had a chance to watch the Dana White Contender Series. We'll definitely catch that next week. There's lots of boxing drama. We got Bellator action, PFL action. So a stacked show for you on episode 10. I'm your host, Shane Gillette. So let's jump right into it. On the UFC, we have some fun matches that have been made. We have Fernando Padilla versus Kyle Nelson going down September 16th. Kyle Nelson coming off a big win, looking reinvigorated. Sad news, we had the Gastelum Rachmanov fight postponed. Supposedly it's going to get booked again in September, but there are, rumors and Shavkat being very active on social media trying to get another fight booked, so stay tuned for that. I do hope that fight stays. I think that'll be a fantastic matchup. We have Miles John versus Dan Argueta, September 23rd. We have Bill Algeo and Alexander Hernandez, October 7th. That should be a great stylistic matchup. We have Brian Battle and AJ Fletcher in another fun affair. We have David Dvorak versus Tatsuro Taira, October 14th. And holy cow, man, Tatsuro Taira, young stud, he's really been showing off. But jumping into the top 15 against very established and somewhat desperate David Dvorak, that's going to be a fantastic fight starting the fall off. This weekend we have a short notice fight. Terrence McKinney being active, doing what he does best, getting a short notice fight for this weekend's card. We have Israel Adesanya, Sean Strickland official for UFC 293. Izzy called for it. There was some visa and travel issues, but Sean Strickland and Camp made it happen for the biggest opportunity of his UFC career. We got Daniel Rodriguez, Santiago Ponzinibbio, September 16th. You want to talk about stylistic matchups? That's going to be a banger, no doubt. We got Rodrigo Nascimento and Dontel Mays, November 4th in the light heavyweight division. Volkan Ozdemir with another new opponent, getting Bogdan Gustav for September 2nd. And then in the women's side of things, a very good matchup. We got Jennifer Maia, Vivian Araujo, October 14th. I'm really excited for that one. And then just this afternoon, it's Wednesday, Jeff Neal officially out of the fight against Ian Gary for UFC 292 next weekend in Boston, which honestly is a heartbreaker. I can't wait to break down that card. But with that being announced just hours before I went live, Neil Magny posted signing a contract. Ian asked for Neil. Neil was booked. Neil got the W. That fight makes sense. Neil Magny, he's definitely going to save the day as the Haitian sensation does. I'm sure that's going to happen. It isn't official. We'll definitely post that on Bows and TKO's Instagram and Twitter once we find that out. But other than that, we have a couple weeks of The Ultimate Fighter. I watched the last episode last night. So we got 2 episodes to recap here. And then the finale going to be happening on the 292 card. But, man, how about Timur Valiev, Brad Katona? When I saw that Timur got released from the UFC, I was kind of scratching my head. And you could pretty much say the same thing with Brad Katona. But this was an amazing fight, man. High action. This looked like a UFC fight. It was a UFC quality fight. Brad just wasn't throwing a lot of combos as the fight went on. A lot of 1-2s where Timur was very active with multiple shots, following up with kicks. I thought he mixed in the kicks and combos brilliantly through the 3 rounds. And some of this could have been because Brad ate some massive shots early in the round. I don't know if he was all there throughout the whole fight, but he's in such good shape. He's such a veteran. He's just going to do what he knows how to do, and that's fight on instinct. Honestly, I was super impressed with the endurance by Valiv. 3-round fight after having to make three times already. He had the fight where his other opponent had staph infection. He had to make weight again, making weight here. I was a little concerned as the fight went on about his endurance, and he clearly showed that was not a big deal. And to be honest, I thought this was a highway robbery. I thought Timur Valiv clearly won this fight. I was really shocked that Brad Katona won this fight. I don't know if there's something to go on with McGregor and some biases that's going on here. We've had a ton of judging instances and issues in the UFC. I'm sure a lot of these judges are the same UFC judges, so it's really kind of questionable to understand what the hell has been happening. But I thought Timur Valiv debatably won all 3 rounds, absolutely won round 1 and 3. So I'm not too sure really what happened in this fight. I think Timur is getting robbed. I hope he gets a UFC opportunity. Potentially he gets added to a card, or maybe even the finale card with another opponent. I'm sure Dana White's going to provide him an opportunity. He deserves it. Islam Makhachev came in on that episode and was hyping them all up. I just hate to see, as hard as it is to make the UFC, clearly stick with the UFC, as quality of a fighter as Timur is. That happened. That's heartbreaking. I feel for the guy. We should all on social media fight for Timur to get a spot in the UFC. Now, outside of the Ultimate Fighter, that was 2 episodes ago. We had an episode last night. I mean, these guys were saying, we're going to clang and bang. It's going to be one hell of a fight. And boy, was that fight one hell of a fight. I thought that this was probably the best quality fight and the best back and forth action that we've seen in the Ultimate Fighter. Dana White's loving this. There's been a couple kind of not so quality fights, and this one sure in the hell was awesome. And it just shows you the heart, the resilience that these guys have had to fight with. They're the veterans coming back into the Ultimate Fighter, having to deal with this, be in the house with a bunch of men, try to get their thing right. They're on the same team, they're friends, but oh my goodness, did they go for it. And there's so much on the line for these guys. They were taking so many shots, so much damage. They just had to find a way to get the victory. And you feel for them a little bit, but I was just massively, massively impressed with what I saw. I don't have their names down here, so I want to get their names right here. Let's see. So we had Kurt Hollabaugh and Jason Knight. Jason Knight was beat up, brutalized. Kurt Hollabaugh is a very, very good, well-rounded fighter. I thought his last fight was very, very close to call. And he came in with heavy hands and gave it anything and everything. Michael Chandler even said maybe there's some Jacqueline Hyde he's been playing throughout the house. When you have to fight so many times in such a short span, some fighters fight twice a year, maybe once a year. They're fighting 3 to 4 times. There's so much damage that could be taken on the body. But Kurt was willing to take shots from Jason to get in close range and land those powerful shots. So, again, I was very, very impressed. I'm excited to see Kurt Hollabaugh in the finals. We have Brad Katona in the finals. The bantamweight showdown to see who's going to fight Brad Katona is going next week. So I've enjoyed the show. I know that a lot of people think that the Ultimate Fighter hasn't been as good as expected. They want to see a lot of Conor McGregor, and it's the Conor McGregor show. They had the coaches challenge in the ice tub. They were in there for like 15 to 20 minutes. You could see them shaking and jittering. So I've enjoyed it. There hasn't been a lot of in-house things. It's been mostly dedicated on the fighters and the action. But hey, I'm loving the vet story. Maybe the vets versus the new guys and the prospects wasn't the best idea, because basically the vets cleaned house. But I've enjoyed it. I think it's good comeback stories. Who doesn't like a comeback story? And in the world of boxing, we have KSI, Tommy Fury, October 14th. This is official. I have not seen KSI fight. Clearly, Tommy Fury won against Jake Paul. If KSI could beat Tommy Fury, then watch out. We have the new, video blogger or internet sensation leader when it comes to boxing. I highly doubt he'll win, but we'll see. It'll be intriguing. And added to this card, this got announced yesterday, Logan Paul, Dylan Dennis. That's right, Dylan Dennis. He's actually going to fight, and you would almost not believe this would happen, but there is supposedly a $100,000 pullout clause if he does pull out of the fight. So lots of interesting things happening on October 14th. I'll be tuning in. You know, I tuned in this past weekend to Jake Paul, Nate Diaz. I thought this was a pretty high-quality fight. Everyone's saying it was an amazing fight. I don't know about an amazing fight because Nate just clearly isn't a boxer and wasn't willing to change what he knows, as he doesn't have a jab to keep distance. He doesn't have a lot of combinations. He takes a lot of Jake Paul's damage until he gets in close and has his weird angle shots that doesn't look like there's a ton of power behind them. I will say, though, after the crazy fury in round one, where Jake Paul, I thought, was going to knock Nate Diaz out, which is damn near impossible to do. Jake looked good, but Nate did have his fun towards the later rounds, was able to land some moments. They talked, they were very good sports behind the whole thing. They were talking about maybe doing this in the MMA. Jake probably would like to do it in PFL. Nate Diaz is not opening to that. I think it's Real Fighting Inc. is his own, like, the promotion he helps promote is where they would want to fight. But it was fun. He had Jake in the guillotine. He talked about, we already saw MMA. I had him in a guillotine, had the single leg. There was some good banter. It was somewhat of a quality fight for a Jake Paul fight, especially as you saw Nate starting to do his thing a little bit at the end. But, man, if you're going to box, right? And it didn't seem like Nate was willing to take that on. I did actually watch some of Nate's video blog leading up to the fight. You could see his hand speed, his work, and I was a little bit hopeful. But I thought about betting $100 on Nate or a no Nate knockdown, and I'm glad I did not. Officially, they say that this was one of the most betted boxing fights besides the Terrence Crawford, Earl Spence Jr. fight. So I'm sure a lot of people put bets on those props. They were pretty attractive. But as you would expect, Jake Paul's a favorite for a reason. He's taking this seriously. I don't think Nate really did. But Nate's, excitement still builds on. It did really well. I'm interested to see if they do fight MMA, as we have not seen Jake Paul do that. And to give you some viewers of what's been going on, UFC 291 in Salt Lake City for the BMF title. I was there. Had 2 million combined viewers for prelims on ESPN and ABC. So just for the prelims, that's the second most viewed UFC event on TV in the Disney era, and it averaged 1.3 million. The prelims were fantastic. There was a lot of finishes. I don't blame the viewers. I was definitely tuned in. And there was 8 UFC prelim simulcasts this year, which is a 30% increase year over year. So some great numbers from the UFC here. We also had Spence in the Crawford fight that did 650,000 pay-per-view buys. Each fighter with their payouts is getting 25 million. I thought they would do 1 million plus buys. It's one of the more hyped fights. I think they got a little shadowed down by the Garcia Tank Davis fight that just happened. You had a mega super fight that hasn't happened in boxing. You followed up with another one. I'm not surprised. But I can't wait to see what the UFC 291 pay-per-view numbers are or were. Let me double check to make sure that that's not out yet. Let's see. I know it takes some time. It's estimated $750,000 buys and a $40 million revenue. So there was a lot of debate. Is the Crawford fight going to do more buys, or is UFC 291? My vote was in UFC 291. I mean, Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, certified banger, 100% going to be fireworks. We got the crazy head kick knockout in round 2. So, hey, we have that. That's not final numbers. But even the estimation's higher than the Crawford fight. Amanda Serrano has officially signed with the PFL. This is all Jake Paul and the doings that he's done. Amanda Serrano looked good in her win on the Jake Paul boxing card. Let's see, I did watch it a little bit. But I didn't get to tune in a lot. But she looks good, man. She's got great technique. She's a hard hitter. She just beat Heather Hardy via unanimous decision. So she retained her WBA, WBC, IBF, WBO, and IBO featherweight titles. So she's crushing. She signs with the PFL. That's really going to be interesting. Anthony Joshua is supposed to fight Dillian White. That's coming up. But Dillian White had a positive drug test. I'm not too sure for what. So he's going to fight Robert Helenius on short notice. You know, if Anthony Joshua is fighting, I'm tuning in somewhat or try to catch some of it. But it's a bummer he's not fighting Dillian White. Anthony Joshua, I feel like definitely needs some bigger names to keep him really relevant. And I think he's struggling in that department. Obviously, he's taken some losses as well. Dana White Contender Series started. First episode last night. That'll be every Tuesday. So we will make sure that we recap those episodes as I've gotten more and more into the Contender Series, and the Contender Series alums are taking over the UFC. Really bummed about this. UFC 298 this weekend in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. It is headlined by Logan Storley, Brennan Ward. You also have Sydney Outlaw taking on Islam Mamedov, and Kai Kamaka versus Ahmed Magomedov. There's other fights I know, but those are the fights that intrigue me, the fights that I think are worthy of tuning in. But I was really excited for Wyoming alum 307 representing Bryce Misfit Meredith. Ended up having an injury and pulling out of his fight this weekend. You know, he's only had one Bellator fight. I think he was like a minus 600 favorite on this. But, you know, I'm interested to see his continual development and growth as he continues his MMA career. So definitely bummed out about that. And then Bellator with the big announcement. Bellator 300 announced today. There is 4 title fights, but the ones that intrigue me, we have Chris Cyborg back. She signs a 4-fight deal to stay with Bellator. She's taking on Kat Zingano. That should be a very fun one, although they're both later in their careers. It's typically, you know, life of ex-UFC fighters and studs in the Bellator promotion. And then we have Usman Nurmagomedov taking on Brent Primus. That's going to be a great one. Usman looks the real deal and is one of those guys I could see competing very well in the UFC. And then I forgot to preview this last weekend, but there wasn't a lot to preview, to be honest. We did have the PFL featherweight and light heavyweights go down as they are getting ready for their championship $1 million fights coming soon. We had Jesus Pinedo, man, wins after Brendan Longnang, now gets getting a round 2 TKO over a very, very good Bubba Jenkins. He's just coming out swinging, hands is still, wanting to get finishes, and that's exactly what he did. Josh Silveira defeating Ty Flores via a round 1 knockout. That was a great finish with the knees. And then you may know this guy from the highlight knockout against Joaquin Buckley. But Impa Kasagane defeating Martine Hamlet via round 1 knockout in the PFL finale for $1 million. Boy, can your life change sometimes. You know, got to root for the guy. He's looked like the real deal. So we had the Bellator, we had the PFL, some boxing and MMA news. But last weekend, we had UFC Fight Night Nashville. And we got the pick'ems back up. We're feeling good. We went 8-4 last week. We're 61-42 with bows and TKOs, almost plus 20. We'll keep the picks coming out on social media at Bows and TKOs, Instagram and Twitter every weekend. So make sure to tune into that. And as I get Bows and TKOs further developed, probably start a Facebook group or a Discord or something like that. Give the parlays that I'm betting and recommending so you guys can see my actual parlays and picks. But a couple of fights and things that, or no, we broke down the whole card. But Marion Santos pulled out, or was supposed to be in for Jesse Butler against Sean Woodson. I believe a week out. Marion Santos could not because of visa issues. So Dennis Buzaksha was able to come in for Sean Woodson. So we had 3 different opponents in a 2-week span. Talk about chaos. He got to stay on the card, and we will break down his fight. But we're going to start In the prelims with the first fight of the night, we had Asu Almabayev with a round 2 submission via rear naked choke over Odie Osborne. Performance of the night, 50 Gs. And this was a fight I got wrong, but I talked about it last week. I'm not too surprised. Asu had a quality resume, although this is his UFC debut. And there was a clash of styles here that definitely did not favor Odie. And that was really it. I mean, you look at the strikes, there was not much done because Asu was looking to get Odie to the ground as soon as possible. I think he had a blast double after a couple strikes that Odie had, and he was able to have top control. Odie was able to somehow survive a submission attempt at the end of round 1. Round 2, Asu gets a quick takedown, gets the back, sinks in the rear naked choke. Welcome to the UFC, Asu. So, statistically, Odie only landed 8 total strikes, 4 of those significant, compared to Asu's 52 total strikes and 26 significant. A lot of that ground and pound. He did get 2 takedowns in 5 attempts, so Odie did shrug a couple, and he did have those 2 submission attempts. So Odie now starts a new losing streak. He moves to 2-2 since 2022, and Asu extends his winning streak to 14 wins his UFC debut. Now, Asu made a great statement win in his UFC debut, again, against a very good Odie in the UFC. I think a fight with Alan Nascimento, that could be a fun one and an appropriate next step for Asu. And for Odie, how about a fight with Jimmy Flick? I think that could be a fun matchup and a good back-on-track win for both of those guys. The winner there right back in the mix. And then we had Sean Woodson with a unanimous decision over Denis Buzukja. And again, wild situation for Woodson. Multiple opponents, short notice. Dennis talked about his weight cut as he trains with Aljamain and team. And made the brutal weight cut, somehow got it in. You could see he was a little zapped from with energy throughout the fight, especially as it went on. But Sean, man, he's a good striker, kept the fight at distance, and really, managed the fight very well. Probably bummed not to get a finish in this fight, but a quality performance by Sean, the sniper Woodson. Statistically, huge difference here. Sean landed 163 total strikes, 71 of those significant, and he did have 4 takedowns in 5 attempts, so when he wanted a takedown, it was there. Dennis only landed 46 total strikes, 42 of those significant. He did get a reversal and was 0 for 1 in his own takedown attempts. So Sean technically extends his winning streak to 3. He is 3-0-1 with that draw since the beginning of 2021. And Dennis has his 7-fight winning streak come to an end. He starts a new losing streak in his UFC debut. So what's next? I think, Sean's going to turn around relatively quick. He talked about wanting to fight more times in the year as long as he's healthy. How about Darren Elkins, a veteran, or Daniel Pineda? I think those would be great fights. And for Dennis, how about Blake Bilder, El Animal, who just come off a loss as well? And how this fight did not get a bonus, I know that the bonuses were to the finishes. I think it's highway robbery. We had Cody Durden with a unanimous decision over Jake Hadley. And I was in shock this whole fight. The volume, the scrambles, the reversals. Both guys in deep waters that could have lost the fight at one point. And they were able to overcome it. Put on one hell of a fight. I am shocked both men were able to not get finished, either by damage or submission. And I thought the round 2 in this fight was one of the best rounds I've seen. And this is what makes the flyweight division so fun, is the high intensity, the high pace, the speed, the quickness, the scrambles that these guys possess. And both men, bravo, tougher than nails. They had a fight against very tough adversity. And Cody even talked about injuring his arm. He's getting MRIs on his shoulder and arm because of that deep arm bar that probably a lot of guys are going to tap to, and he just was willing to not do that because he almost finished Jake prior in the fight. He knew he probably was on his way to a decision victory if he didn't get the finish himself. just really deep arm bar. Again, tougher than nails, and bravo to Cody. It's paying off. Hopefully the MRI comes back clean. I haven't looked to see if what the diagnosis is on that. Statistically, Cody landed 63 total strikes, 38 of those significant. He had the submission attempt and 4 takedowns in 6 attempts. And Jake landed 45 total strikes, 26 of those significant. He did have 3 submission attempts, a reversal, and was 0 for 3 in his own takedowns. Obviously, Cody, more of a wrestling background, was more successful with the grappling. But huge win for Cody. There was lots of smack talking in this fight leading up to it. Cody extends his winning streak to 4. He is 4-1 since 2022. He enters the top 15 at number 15. He's got to love to see a number next to his name. Well deserved, hard fought. Jake has his 2-fight winning streak come to an end. He starts a new losing streak and is 3-2 in the UFC. So I would love to see Cody Durden take on Sumaderi. I think that would be another fantastic fight and a good step up for him. And for Jake, he could take on Charles Johnson. Either way, I'm a fan of both of these guys. One hell of a fight. And this fight was going to show up. I was a little surprised this one was on the prelims, but we had Billy Quarantillo with a unanimous decision over Damon Jackson. No performance of the night bonus, but very, very good fight. And went to like a traditional Billy Q fight and how I could have drawn it up. I will admit I didn't expect Damon to have that much success early, though. He was just coming through, pushing through Billy, landing good shots, pushing him back. A little bit of desperation mode for Billy in the first round, got taken down, was just trying to survive to the bell. But round 2, you would never know that happened. Billy came out, put the pedal to the metal. You could see that Damon exerted a lot of energy in round 1, and he just put it to Damon the next 2 rounds. He landed more volume. He was successful everywhere he wanted the fight to go. Even had a couple submission attempts, and it was a great performance. I think, if anything, a takeaway for me is Damon Jackson's tough. He's had kind of a roller coaster of a career, but he did really, really well in this fight against Billy Q and earned a lot of respect for me as a hardcore MMA fan. But you got to love you some Billy Q. He's like a modern-day Rocky. For the sake of Billy Q, don't take as much damage and make round 1 so tough on you, because then you got to win the next 2 rounds or get a finish, and you're not going to be able to do that as you move closer or into the top 15. Statistically, Billy landed 169 total strikes, 100 of those significant. He did have a submission attempt, and Damon landed 75 total strikes, 67 of those significant, but only 3 takedowns in 13 attempts. So, Billy Q, props on the takedown defense. So Billy starts a new winning streak. He is 3-2 since the beginning of 2021. Damon extends his losing streak to 2, which have both been this year, so he's been very active. He did have a 4-fight winning streak before the losing streak. He's been on a roll. Both guys, there's not a lack of options for their next opponent. I really like the idea of Billy Q against Nathaniel Wood, who just fought, or maybe Lerone Murphy, who also just fought on the London card. For Damon, a matchup with Nate the Train, Nate Landwehr. That's must-see TV. Could you imagine that? I mean, I would expect a knockout if those two matched up. So matchmakers, make it happen. And then what a shocker this fight was. This is a fight we got wrong. Carlston Harris with a round three submission via anaconda choke over Jeremiah Wells. 50 G's performance of the night. And Jeremiah Wells had the fight the way he wanted at round 1. I picked Jeremiah. I thought he was easily on the path to victory. And then as he got tired out a little bit, Carlston was able to reverse him, use his jiu-jitsu, get in a nice deep anaconda choke, and all that hard work, leads to a submission. So, brutal night for Jeremiah, but he did look good. You just got to be careful. Jeremiah landed 41 total strikes, 18 of those significant. He had 3 takedowns in 5 attempts, so was successful in the striking and the grappling. He did have 2 submission attempts of his own. And Carlston only landed 19 total strikes, 5 of those significant, had the submission attempt, and was 0 for 1 in takedowns. So he landed a couple decent shots throughout, but again, this fight was trending to a Jeremiah dominant win. You could even say debatably a 10-8 round in there. But Carlston caught him, found an opening, got the job done, and that's why you fight. I would love to see Carlston take on Chaos Williams next. I think that would be entertaining. And for Jeremiah, how about Elizao Zaleski? I brought a couple of these guys up in other fights, but hey, with these wins, great opponents, would be fun fights for the fan. And then a fight I was calling for fight of the night potential, another fight I thought should have been on the main card. We had Kyler Phillips back from the suspension, unanimous decision over Rayoni Barcelos, and it was a high-quality affair, man. Really, it was Kyler being more aggressive and have higher volume with his striking, getting the bigger moments, the bigger damaging shots, and he was able to shut down the grappling of Rayoni, which is not an easy task. So Rayoni was trying to adjust to that throughout the fight, but it was just too little too late as the volume and damage that was getting done by Kyler was overwhelming. Statistically, Kyler landed 80 total strikes, 72 of those significant, with a knockdown, and he was 1 for 4 on takedown attempts, so he even got a takedown of his own, and mixed in the grappling just to keep Rayoni guessing at what was coming. I don't think he really wanted the takedown. And Rayoni landed 52 total strikes, 46 of those significant. He did get 3 takedowns, but in 11 attempts. And when he got the takedown, Kyler was able to scramble up against the cage, get his back on it, and get up. Very good fight, very fun fight. Kyler extends his winning streak to 2 now. He is 3-1 since the beginning of 2021. And Rayoni extends his losing streak to 2. He is 1-4 since the beginning of 2021. What's next? We talked about this on Matchmaker Monday. Kyler, Chris Gutierrez, that's the fight to make right in the top 15. And Rayoni, he's been on a skid. If he is still in the UFC, he could fight Casey Kenny in his return fight from injuries and surgeries. Getting into the main card, some of these fights were decent early. And again, I thought the other fights should have been on the main card. But we had Ludovic Klein with a unanimous decision over Ignacio Bahamondes. And, no surprise here. The fight kind of went as you expected. Clash of styles. Ignacio had some moments with his strikes. Ludovic came in, closed distance aggressively, mixed in the grappling and striking, and was just too much for the young Ignacio. Statistically, Ignacio landed 62 total strikes, 43 of those significant, and was 0 for 1 in his own takedown attempt. So he did have some moments. He was able to get some strikes landed, but Ludovic had more volume than him. 94 total strikes, 56 of those significant, and the thing that really changed the fight, 3 takedowns and 5 attempts. We clearly know Ignacio. I'm sure he needs to work on that if you want him to fight top-level competition, but he's still so young, shows a ton of potential. So Ludovic, he's cruising, extends his winning streak to 3. He did have a draw in between, but we'll keep the winning streak there for him. Ignacio has his 3-fight winning streak come to an end, and he does start a new losing streak. Next, I would love to see Ludovic take on Mike Davis. And for Ignacio, give him a striker. Imagine Ignacio and Fares Ziam. I think that would be a brilliant, brilliant kickboxing affair. Moving on, the return of Tanner Boser, unanimous decision over Alexa Kamor. And I just wanted to see more from Tanner. Alexa's huge, he's big, he does pack a punch, and clearly can take a punch as he took some big shots. But Tanner went to the game plan of getting Alexa up against the cage, clinching, dirty boxing, wearing on him, and when they were split up, did land some big shots. But where Tanner is in his career, having to kind of move down to light heavyweight after a bad stretch, I would like to see more, risks, some more shots taken. But either way, big win for Tanner Boser, his second fight at light heavyweight. Statistically, Tanner landed 145 total strikes, with 120 of those significant. And Kimura landed 105 total, 68 of those significant, while going 0 for 1 on takedowns. Let's see here. So Tanner ends his 2-fight losing streak. That's got to feel good. Sometimes you just got to find a way to victory, and I think that's exactly what Tanner did here. He starts a new winning streak. He is only 2-3 since the beginning of 2021. Alexa extends his losing streak to 3, and he is now 2-3 in the UFC after 2 quick wins. He now is on a 3-fight skid. So if Alexa's still in the UFC as well, I think a fight with Zach Pauga would be ideal. And I would love to see Tanner take on Ihor Potieria. I think that would be an appropriate next step for him. Moving on, we had Diego Lopez with a first-round submission via armbar over Gavin Tucker. 50 G's performance of the night. And what a brand Diego Lopez is bringing. No strikes, but is able to use brilliant jiu-jitsu. The transitions, amazing. I could only dream of doing that in a real-time competition. And he's doing it against one of the better jiu-jitsu practitioners and Gavin Tucker. So the fact that that happened blew my mind. And a reason I picked Gavin is I thought he would have success in the striking against Diego, and that Diego wasn't going to be able to, be so far ahead of him in the grappling in this fight. But it was brilliant. And he got in a nice armbar, transitioning off a triangle. It was a beautiful, beautiful display. But how often do you see this? Statistically, Diego won the fight without a strike, but he did have 3 submission attempts. And Gavin didn't land any strikes either, but had the takedown, which forced the jiu-jitsu from Diego as he was on top. And boy, did Diego make slight work of that. So Diego is now starting a new winning streak. He took the short notice fight against a top 10 ranked opponent in Movsar Evloev. Looked good in doing so. Gets his first UFC victory, so he's now 1-1 in the UFC. And for Gavin, he extends his losing streak to 2 and, has been out for some time. Has not won since December of 2020. So where do these guys go next? Let's give Diego another jiu-jitsu match. I would love to see him get Ryan Hall in his return fight. We're talking about a couple guys, Casey Kenny, Ryan Hall, that's been out for a while, that are due back soon. I think that would be great and very interesting for fight fans. And for Gavin, how about Steve Garcia? Then moving to the big light heavyweights, I figured this would be a finish, and boy, was it a beautiful one. Dustin Jacoby with a first-round TKO over Kennedy and Zekwashu. Performance of the night, 50 G's. Kennedy is big. He is a big boy, long reach, looks thick, looks a lot thicker than Dustin. But Dustin's fought big opponents throughout his career, is a kickboxing stud, and was able to find the opening, sat Kennedy down, got the TKO finish. And Kennedy's young. I expect him with that frame and size to be back up there. But a massive win for Dustin. And I really think he deserves higher ranked opponents now after defending his spot a few times. And he called that out in the mic after the fight. It only took Dustin 10 total strikes and significant with the knockdown. And Kennedy only landed 4 total and significant strikes. So Dustin ends his 2-fight losing streak. He does start a new winning streak and stays at 15. Kennedy ends his 3-fight winning streak and starts a new losing streak. So back to the drawing board for him. So what's next? Again, I think Dustin deserves to fight up. I think a great fight for both men. Dustin and Dominic Reyes, who's definitely had some adversity trying to get back on the right track. And for Kennedy, how about a scrap with Alonzo Menefield? Sign me up for that one all day, any day. And then one of the more hyped women in all of UFC right now, Tatiana Suarez, welcome back to the strawweight division. Gets a second-round submission via guillotine choke over Jessica Andrade. Performance of the night, 50 G's. And boy, oh boy, was it a beautiful performance. We all know Jessica Andrade is dangerous on her feet. Tatiana did land some strikes, but went straight to the grappling. Wanted a top win over a top opponent so she could move up the rankings. and now honestly is not that far from a title shot. It only took Tatiana 25 total strikes, 23 of those significant. She did have the submission attempt and was 3 for 3 in takedown attempts, which we know is somewhat of a weakness of Andrade. But a win like that after so much time off, first time cutting weight to strawweight, brilliant performance. That's only a stock increasing performance for Tatiana. Jessica only landed 13 total strikes and 11 significant. She's been as active as anyone in the UFC, so it'll be interesting to see what she does, especially as she's ranked in both strawweight and flyweight and has bounced around. So what is next? First, Tatiana stays undefeated. She's on a 10-fight winning streak. She does move to 7-0 in the UFC alone, which is massively impressive. She moves up 6 spots in the rankings to number 4. And Jessica extends her losing streak to 3. This year alone, she is 1-3. She's had 4 fights. I would assume we get a 5th this year. And she does stay, or moves down in the rankings to number 6, both in strawweight and flyweight. So really interested to see what's next for Bate Estaca. But what's next? I think you do Yan Shenyon versus Tatiana, the number 1 eliminator spot for the title, as we do have Zhang Weili and Amanda Lemos there. Rose has gone to flyweight, so that's what makes sense for me. And for Jessica, a fight with Marina Rodriguez, that would be nutty, an amazing striking display, so sign me up for that one. And then the main event. Boy, was this just an interesting thing, but things happen. Corey Sandhagen with a unanimous decision over Rob Font. I assume the fight wouldn't be as aesthetically pleasing as the Nurmagomedov fight, but Corey did say he hurt his arm. He showed it on social media, ended up tearing his tricep in round 1. And sadly, he's going to be out for 6 months. But he did not let Rob Font get the jab working or the boxing going. He looked like a Nurmagomedov going for blast doubles, brilliantly timed, which we've seen his grappling capability. This was the best that I've seen it. And really was just having top control. And the first few rounds, I thought Rob was doing brilliant by not just staying down and accepting the position. He was pushing the hips. He was trying submission attempts. He was going for go-go platas, omoplatas. He was really keeping things interesting. But in rounds 3, 4, and 5, I felt like he was just acceptable of those positions and was wanting to use his jiu-jitsu when maybe he could have went to the cage, which it didn't seem like that's what he was trying to do. Get up, get the fight standing, and try to go from there. And obviously, try to get a takedown defense. So yeah, not the most aesthetically pleasing fight. I feel for Rob Font. I understand how that can go. Clearly, it's something he can work on his game. But yeah, I would say the Nate Diaz Jake Paul fight was better than the main event here. And when we look at the stats, torn tricep and all, Corey did land 132 total strikes, but only 34 of those significant. So a lot of touchy-tappy stuff on top. He did have 1 submission attempt. But the key stat here, 7 for 7 on takedown attempts. The Corey Sandman Sandhagen evolution before our eyes. And Rob landed 25 total strikes, 9 of those significant, with 1 takedown and 2 attempts. But we can't really knock down Corey on this. He's been the stylistically appealing fighter with the kickboxing. He's shown some grappling. But Aljamain Sterling and Merab were definitely clowning on him on how it was a boring fight. Welcome to the dark side. Now you know how it is trying to defend your spot. So I was enjoying some of that back and forth. Rob landed 25 total, 9 significant, and he did have 1 takedown and 2 attempts. So Corey extends his winning streak to 3. Rob starts a new losing streak. He's 2-3 since the beginning of 2021. And Corey stays at number 4 in the rankings, and Rob keeps his 7th spot. So what's next? Well, clearly, Corey's not going to be fighting this year with a 6-month minimum timeout with the tricep. So maybe he could come back and get a title opportunity, depending on who's there. If Aljo wins, you talk about moving up. If he does leave, there's an interim situation. So lots of drama in the bantamweight. So it'll be interesting to see. But I would love to see him fight Henry Cejudo potentially, if Henry's still fighting. Triple C still doing the thing in the UFC next year. And for Rob, I think Dominic Cruz could be appealing. I don't know if Dom will take that fight. So maybe Saeed Nurmagomedov That would be a fun fight as well. But solid card overall. You know, we broke down all these fights because they were quality fights. Welcome to the UFC, Asu. Sean Woodson, multiple opponents, doesn't matter. He's talking about wanting to be more active. Hopefully that's the case. Highway robbery on the Cody Durden victory. That should have been a performance. Amazing fight. A classic Billy Q showdown. A real big surprise and gotcha with the Anaconda choke from Carlston. Kyler Phillips doing the Matrix-like things. Shocked he didn't get a finish with that head kick. Ludovic Klein finding a dirty victory against a good striker. Tanner Bozer's first win in light heavyweight, trying to get back on track. Diego Lopez, the jiu-jitsu wizard. Dustin Jacoby with a nice finish. Tatiana Suarez coming for a title. And Corey still keeping his spot with a torn tricep in round 1. So Nashville definitely got what they wanted, you know, got their money's worth. But this weekend, very, very shallow fight night card back in the Vegas, back in the Apex. It's Fight Night Vegas 78. The main card starts at 4 p.m. Pacific, and there's some decent fights that we won't talk about. But you get the Contender Series alumni Francis Marshall taking on Isaac Dolgarian, who's making his UFC debut. We have Ultimate Fighter alum Juliana Miller trying to get back on track after a pretty pitiful performance. She's fighting Luana Santos. Josh Fremd is taking on Jamie Pickett. That stylistically could be an awesome fight. And then obviously Terrence McKinney on short notice taking on Mike Breeden. This is a must win if you ask me. I expect him to handle this easily. I don't know a lot about Mike Breeden, but that's why we're not breaking it down. So we're going to start in the prelims. We got Marcus, the Maniac McGee, 33-year-old fighter with a 7-1 record, taking on JP Young Savage Buys, the 27-year-old fighter with a 9-5 record. Now, this really is an interesting fight between two men seeking success in the UFC with the other man in his way. I think this is going to be a Clash of Styles fight, but one of the more intriguing fights on the card, so that's why we're breaking it down. So Marcus, he came in on a short notice fight, looked really good in his MMA debut. He trains out of the MMA lab. He's on a 3-fight winning streak, and he won his UFC debut only a couple months ago in April. He's an LFA alum, and he shows out. He's a knockout artist, 6 of his 7 wins via knockout. Now, JP trains out of Fortis MMA. If you've been watching Aljamain Sterling's vlogs leading up to his title fight next weekend in Boston, he's been training with JP. He's a Dana White Contender Series 2 times alum. He's a Brave and LFA alum as well. 5 of his 9 wins are via submission, and 3 of his 5 losses are via knockout. Interesting. I do think the pace of this fight is going to be nuts. Both guys are going to come to look to not make this a decision fight. I think JP is going to look for the takedown early and often. I think Marcus is going to be too much on the feet. I think he might get taken down here and there, but he's going to have the gas tank to find a way to victory. I expect another knockout victory for the Maniac. That's why I'm putting him on the parlay. We're marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on to the main card. We got Khalil the War Horse Roundtree Jr., 33 years old with a 12-5 record, and the number 13 next to his name, taking on Chris Dacus, 33 years old with a 12-6 record, and the number 14 next to his name. Hold on, get my mic fixed here. Make sure you guys can hear me. So this is another fight with major implications for both men. They're in their primes at 33 years old, and a win here really gets them back into the rankings where they deserve to be. A loss here, it's kind of like back to the pit that you don't want to be in, and it's hard to get out of the pit. You know what I mean? Khalil, he's a southpaw fighter. He trains out of Syndicate MMA. He is an RFA and Ultimate Fighter alum. He's on a 3-fight winning streak, and 7 of his 11 wins are via knockout. Now, Chris has a black belt in BJJ. He's on a 3-fight losing streak and has not won since September of 2021. He's a Cage Fury, King of the Cage, and Ring of Combat alum. 11 of his 12 wins are via knockout, and 5 of his 6 losses are via knockout to knock out or to be knocked out. I clearly think this ain't going to the decision. I think Khalil has evolved a lot as a fighter. He talked about it a lot on the Joe Rogan podcast and going to Thailand and overseas. I think he's more well-rounded than Chris. I think Chris may even look to get this fight to the ground. But I do think this is going to be Chris's last chance in the UFC. He's going to put it all on the line. That makes for an intriguing fight. But I'm putting my pick on Khalil Roundtree, and I'm avoiding this on a parlay if possible. And this fight I'm really excited for. Potential fight of the night pick here. We have Hakeem Mean Dawodu, the 32-year-old fighter with a 13-3-1 record, taking on Cub Killer Swanson, 39 years old with a 28-13 record. You put Killer Cub, you put Mean Dawodu on a fight card, I'm hyped up. And it's going to be a featherweight showdown, man. You know, Cub did try an attempt at bantamweight. I'm sure it's hard on him at this age. Coming back to the featherweight division. Obviously, both men's in a little bit of a different situation, especially when it comes to age, right? Dawodu, 32, Cub, 39. Cub probably just loving the fight game, just wanting to put on quality performances, keep that highlight reel going. And for Hakeem, this is a push-come-to-shove moment. You got to win this fight if you really want an opportunity in the top 15 and potentially a title. Hakeem has a Muay Thai and kickboxing background. He's an undefeated kickboxing fighter. He's on a one-fight losing streak and is 1-2 since the beginning of 2021. Hasn't been super active, battled injuries. Again, a ton on the line for him. He's a World Series of Fighting alum. 7 of his 13 wins are via knockout. He does have a 3.5-inch reach advantage and a 2.5-inch leg reach advantage in this fight. Now, Cub has a black belt in BJJ. He's pretty much the third in all featherweight records. So, you know, the top, I'm assuming you got guys like Max Holloway and Volkanovski. He had the 2016 Fight of the Year against Doo Ho Choi. He did come from the WEC and is a King of the Cage alum. 13 of his 28 wins are via knockout, and 7 of his 13 losses are via submission. I think Hakeem is a real tricky striker that you can't just plan for. He comes at you from everywhere. He needs to get a win to get back on track, and Cub obviously wants to finish his career on a high note. I do think Cub might mix in some grappling in this fight. I think this fight's going to come down to who can really out-endure each other during a 3-round fight. I would not be shocked if this fight went to decision. I think it's going to be war. I think it's going to be a bloodbath, much like the Cody Durden-Jake fight. So I'm excited for it. I am taking Hakeem, but I will avoid him on a parlay. I do think the Killer Cub has a real opportunity in this fight. And then in the main event, we got Vicente the Silent Assassin Luque, the 31-year-old fighter with a 21-9-1 record and the number 10 next to his name, taking on Rafael Dos Anjos, the 38-year-old fighter with a 32-14 record and the number 9 next to his name. Now this is both men in different situations, much like the Cub-Swanson fight. It's a main event, 5-rounder, which RDA has a ton of experience with. RDA, much like Cub, has bounced around. He went to lightweight. He's back to welterweight, where he's a former champion. I like Luque's striking. It's tough when Luque's coming off a tough loss. Or is it multiple losses? Let's see here. He is coming off. He had to get cleared for this fight by the doctors because he took so much damage against Jeff Neal, coming off the Bilal Muhammad loss as well. So hasn't won since August of 2021, but he's only 31. I expect to see a lot of growth from him. I think he has a lot of potential in this fight, but RDA's been there, done that, and he has not shown any signs of slowing down. He was well on his way to beating a highly talented Rafael Fiziev, until that he caught him in the 5th round, and that was a 5-round war. I think it's going to be an amazing back-and-forth fight, though. When we look at it, Vicente, he trains out of Kill Cliff FC. He has a black belt in BJJ and Luta Livre. 3 of his last 5 fights have been performance of the night or fight of the night. He always brings a great fight. He has the second most submission finishes in welterweight division history with 13. He's tied with Stephen Thompson for the third most post-fight bonuses in UFC welterweight history. Again, we're in for a show here on the main event. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. 11 of his 21 wins are via knockout, 8 via submission, so 19 of his 21 wins via finish. Massively impressive. He's an Ultimate Fighter and Jungle Fight alum, and he has a very lengthy 5.5-inch reach advantage. Now, RDA is an orthodox fighter. He has a 4th degree black belt in BJJ. He has a black Prajid in Muay Thai. He's the former UFC lightweight champion. He's got the longest total fight time in the UFC history with over 8 hours, just barely. He has the most unanimous decision wins in UFC history with 11. I can see another one coming. He's got the second most decision fights in UFC history with 20 of them things. He's on a 1-fight winning streak and is 2-1 since 2022. He's also a Fury FC alum, and 11 of his 32 wins are via submission. Now again, RDA has looked great in his last few fights. I think not cutting the weight and coming back to welterweight is going to help him with the endurance. I liked his game plan in his previous fights, and I think the way he was on his way to defeat Fiziev until he got caught is going to be much of the game plan here, as I think Luque is going to try to use that length, keep RDA at distance, pick him apart from distance with his kickboxing. He does have some powerful hands, and RDA is going to want to look to get in, get it close, probably have quite a few takedown attempts, get some top control time, tire Vicente out to get those hands opened up later, and as he gets Luque into the deep waters. But I think RDA is going to come in with a very experienced and well-measured game plan. I think it's going to give him the decision victory. I am taking RDA on that parlay. I am marking him down, and we getting that bread. So not a very deep fight night card, but the main event should be fun. I love to see Cub Swanson back in against Hakeem. That's going to be a great fight. And we get Khalil Roundtree in the fight card as well. But next week, it's going down a very, very fun UFC 292 card in Boston, Massachusetts, headlined by the Sugar Show and the greatest bantamweight of all time, Aljamain Sterling. Can't wait. And we're going to be breaking that down here in Montana. I'm here for most of August. It's about to storm now, a nice little August storm. I've enjoyed escaping the heat out of Phoenix. But it's episode 2 of Bows and TKOs. I'm your host, Shane Gillette. See you next week.